Imagine sitting in a quiet, brightly lit room, listening to the steady, rhythmic ticking of a wall clock, expecting nothing more than a routine, boring medical checkup. You feel fine. You slept well enough. You walked into the building on your own 2 feet, and your mind is already drifting toward the tasks waiting on your desk for the afternoon. But then, the doctor looks up from a folder of fresh lab results, looks you straight in the eye, and delivers a sentence that makes the room feel completely silent. He tells you that while your driver's license says you are 42 years old, the tissue, the arteries, and the overall functional capacity of your heart are operating at the level of a 57-year-old man. In a single, devastating fraction of a second, you are forced to confront the reality that you are walking around with an internal engine that is nearly 15 years older than the rest of your body. This is the exact moment that a quiet reality set in for a man named Robert, a busy professional who considered his health to be entirely decent. He didn't have major aches, and he assumed that the slight sluggishness he felt dragging himself out of bed each morning was just the natural tax of modern adult life. But the numbers on the paper didn't lie. His cardiovascular system was under a state of silent, accelerating stress, aging at a pace that was quietly cutting decades away from his long-term future. If this realization hits a nerve, or if you have ever wondered what is truly happening beneath the surface of your own routine health markers, take a moment to like this video. Subscribing to Adrian Wells Prime will ensure you never miss these deep, honest insights into longevity and smarter living as we navigate the years that matter most. What Robert had to face on that heavy afternoon was a profound mismatch between his external appearance and his internal biological reality. Like so many of us, he had fallen into a comfortable, unconscious rhythm dictated by convenience. He didn't think of himself as someone with a poor diet because he wasn't eating fast food out of a paper bag for every meal. Instead, his lifestyle was defined by the socially accepted, normal routine of a busy person. It was the quick, processed breakfast bar grabbed on the way out the door, the pre-packaged deli sandwich eaten quickly over a keyboard during a brief lunch break, and the late-night handful of crackers consumed while unwinding in front of the television. It all seemed entirely harmless, but beneath the surface, these highly processed convenience choices were working against him every single hour of the day, acting like a slow, invisible rust inside his vascular system. The human body possesses an astonishing ability to adapt and mask internal strain, allowing us to feel completely functional even while our vital organs are working twice as hard just to maintain equilibrium. For Robert, his morning fatigue wasn't a natural consequence of turning 40. It was the quiet, muffled cry of a cardiovascular system trying to pump blood through pathways that were constantly dealing with microinflammation. What many adults over 50 don't fully realize is that the body rarely screams when it begins to struggle. It whispers. It whispers in the form of a slightly longer recovery time after physical exertion, a subtle brain fog that settles in by 3 in the afternoon, or a stubborn stiffness in the morning that we easily attribute to an old mattress or a bad night's sleep. When the initial shock of the diagnosis began to clear, Robert's physician offered him an unconventional proposition rather than an immediate prescription. He challenged Robert to commit to a strict, 30-day experimental window, a brief, dedicated month to see if changing the fuel source could fundamentally alter the biological trajectory of his heart. The plan was a complete transition to a traditional, whole food, Mediterranean-style pattern of eating. This meant eliminating the chemistry set ingredients found in ultra-processed snacks and replacing them with a rich abundance of extra virgin olive oil, wild-caught fish, deeply pigmented vegetables, walnuts, and lentils. Robert agreed, treating the next 4 weeks not as a permanent sentence, but as an isolated, day-by-day scientific experiment on his own biology. The log of this experiment officially began with day 1, a Tuesday morning that felt heavy with the weight of clinical data. Robert cleared his pantry, throwing away boxes of refined cereals, processed energy bars, and bags of chips that had been his emotional safety nets for years. The first 3 days felt like a novel adventure. He filled his kitchen with fresh produce, unrefined olive oil, and wild salmon, feeling a surge of initial motivation. But by day 4, the psychological momentum hit a brick wall. The modern food supply is intentionally engineered to trigger intense, repetitive dopamine responses in the human brain, and Robert's nervous system was suddenly starved of its predictable glucose spikes. By Thursday evening, he found himself standing in front of his open refrigerator for 10 minutes, driven by a deep, habitual urge to find something savory, crunchy, and processed. He felt temporarily irritable, a little more tired than usual, and deeply skeptical that changing his dinner plate could ever reverse a 15-year biological deficit. But as day 7 arrived, marking the first official check-in of the experiment, a subtle shift occurred. Replacing his standard processed breakfast with simple whole eggs scrambled with spinach and avocado had begun to stabilize his metabolic pathways. The constant, turbulent roller coaster of blood sugar spikes and subsequent crashes began to flatten out. On that Sunday morning, Robert logged his first tangible victory. He woke up a few minutes before his alarm rang, feeling a genuine, natural readiness to meet the day rather than a heavy, groggy reliance on his first cup of black coffee. Yet, this early success was merely the prelude to a much tougher psychological battle as the experiment crossed into week 2, a phase defined by raw behavioral adjustment. By day 10, the initial novelty had completely vanished, replaced by the cold, hard grind of behavior modification. It was a rainy Thursday night after an exhausting 10-hour workday when the first major relapse occurred. Overwhelmed by stress and mental fatigue, Robert bypassed his planned dinner of baked cod and roasted vegetables, pulled into a local diner, and ordered a bacon cheeseburger with a large side of fries. It was a moment of total vulnerability, a surrender to the old, comfortable patterns of convenience. As he finished the meal, a heavy wave of guilt set in. He felt like he had completely ruined the experiment, proving to himself that a lifetime of modern habits was simply too powerful to break in a single month. But this failure moment became the turning point of the entire month. Instead of allowing a single off-track meal to trigger a total abandonment of the project, Robert woke up on day 11 with a different mindset. He realized that sustainable health is not defined by flawless perfection, but by the resilience of your recovery. He returned immediately to his clean whole foods, and what happened next surprised him. Instead of feeling comforted by the heavy diner meal, his body reacted with immediate protest. He spent the entire morning of day 11 feeling bloated, lethargic, and weighed down, a physical confirmation that his system was already becoming highly sensitive to the inflammatory nature of ultra-processed fats. By day 14, the midway point of the log, the physical baseline had completely reset. Robert noted that his chronic afternoon headaches had quietly vanished. His body was shedding its numbness, and he was no longer eating merely to satisfy a restless, anxious urge. He was experiencing a genuine, grounded satisfaction from real nourishment. What researchers discovered later in similar dietary studies is that this specific phase marks a turning point where the gut microbiome begins to rebalance, sending entirely different chemical signals to the brain that naturally diminish the desire for hyper-processed foods. The third week of the experiment introduced an entirely new hurdle: social friction. On day 18, Robert attended a retirement dinner for a close colleague at a traditional Italian restaurant. The table was immediately flooded with baskets of refined white bread, bowls of heavy cream pasta, and sugary desserts. This is where things took an unexpected turn. Instead of feeling deprived or isolated while ordering a simple grilled chicken breast over a bed of dark greens with olive oil, Robert felt a sudden, powerful sense of control. He watched his peers slowly succumb to the post-meal sluggishness, complaining about their indigestion and fatigue, while he remained sharp, light, and entirely present in the conversation. By day 21, the final weekly milestone before the medical reveal, the experiment had transformed into an intuitive practice of self-preservation. It was on this day that Robert logged an unexpected surge in mental clarity, an awakening that felt as though a thin, translucent veil had been lifted from his cognitive faculties. He found himself focusing on complex professional tasks for hours without the usual brain fog, and his mood maintained a calm, resilient stability that surprised both him and his family. He was no longer fighting his cravings. His biology had genuinely shifted its preferences. The final stretch, from day 25 to day 30, became a time of deep anticipation and intense anxiety. The physical changes were undeniable. Robert was looking leaner. His skin possessed a healthier color, and his morning energy was completely restored. He had genuinely believed that slowing down, feeling stiff, and carrying a foggy mind were the inevitable, unalterable taxes of crossing into middle age. But his body's rapid response to real nutrition proved that the human organism is hardwired for healing, always waiting for the right conditions to restore its natural vitality. Yet, the lingering question remained. Would these subjective feelings of wellness actually translate to the heart and yielding data on a laboratory report? Robert knew that his heart age had been measured at 15 years beyond his chronological baseline, and he feared that 30 days of clean eating might not be enough to move such a heavy biological needle. On the morning of day 30, Robert walked back into the clinic for his final blood draw, his heart hammering against his ribs in a state of high suspense. An hour later, he sat across from his physician, watching the doctor's face intently as he pulled up the fresh lab results on his computer monitor. The doctor paused for a long, heavy moment before speaking, looking at the screen, then down at the paperwork from a month ago, and then back up at Robert with an expression of quiet disbelief.